Every single business model you've ever encountered is basically a mutation of one original idea. A company makes a thing, and then someone pays money for that thing. That's it. So today I'm breaking down every major business model, how they actually work, how they fail, and why some print money while others collapse. Starting with the one that started it all, direct sales. This is the OG. The model's so simple it barely feels like a strategy, yet it's the foundation everything else on this list is riffing on. You make a product, you sell it to a buyer, money changes hands. Done. Whether that's B2C like Gap selling clothes directly to consumers, or B2B like an industrial equipment manufacturer closing six-figure contracts over steak dinners, the core mechanic is identical. One transaction, one exchange of value for money. Here's the thing though, even companies running subscriptions, freemium, whatever, they still rely on a direct sale at some level. Someone, somewhere, has to say yes and hand over their card. Every fancy model you'll hear about later is just this, wearing a disguise. Defensibility comes from brand loyalty, distribution advantages, and deep integration into customer workflows where switching costs make leaving painful. But the killer failure mode. Commoditization. The moment a competitor offers something nearly identical for cheaper, margins collapse, acquisition costs outpace revenue, and you're not running a business anymore. You're running a very expensive hobby, which is, not ideal, but at least direct sales gives you a fighting chance at differentiation. The next model on this list? It deliberately sells you something at a loss, and somehow that's the plan. Razor and blade. Here's a fun one. The thing you think you're buying, that's not the product. The product is what you throw away. The razor and blade model works like this: sell someone a durable piece of hardware at cost or even at a loss, then lock them into buying expensive proprietary consumables forever. The real money was never in the thing sitting on your shelf, it was in the thing you toss in the garbage every 2 weeks. Gillette figured this out in the early 1900s, sell the handle cheap, charge a fortune for the blades. And it worked so well that basically every industry stole the playbook. Inkjet printers cost less than a nice dinner, but replacement cartridges cost more than the printer itself. Nespresso machines are practically a gift. The pods, that's where George Clooney gets paid. Game consoles do the same thing. Sony and Microsoft have historically sold hardware at or below manufacturing cost because once you buy the box, you're buying games, subscriptions, and digital content for the next 7 years. You didn't buy a PlayStation, you bought a storefront that lives in your living room. The whole model survives on one thing: making sure nobody else can sell compatible consumables, proprietary designs, patents, controlled distribution. The moment third-party cartridges or off-brand pods flood the market at half the price, the entire thing collapses. Consumers eventually notice they've been paying the real price in 1,000 small cuts, which is, not ideal for brand loyalty, but at least with Razor and Blade, you technically own something. Unlike the next model, where you're paying for the privilege of running someone else's business. Franchise. Here's the thing about McDonald's. Everyone thinks it's a burger company. It's not. It's a real estate empire that happens to sell burgers, and that distinction is the entire reason franchising works as well as it does. The franchise model is deceptively simple. You build a business that works, you document every single process down to the last detail, and then you let other people pay to replicate it. They fund the location, they hire the staff, they buy the equipment, you collect fees up front and royalties on every dollar they make. You scale without spending your own money, which is, not ideal for the franchisee's bank account, but extremely ideal for yours. The McDonald brothers figured this out in 1948 with their speedy service system. Everything standardized, everything repeatable. Then Ray Kroc came along and said, what if we did this everywhere? And everywhere they did it. But Kroc's real genius wasn't burgers. He bought the land underneath every restaurant and leased it back to franchisees, so McDonald's collects royalties on sales and rent on the building. Double revenue from every single location without flipping a single patty. The beauty of franchising is aligned incentives. Franchisees have their own capital at risk, so they're motivated to perform. The franchisor gets thousands of owner-operators funding their own expansion while building brand visibility at a national scale. But here's where it breaks down. You're trusting thousands of strangers with your reputation. One food safety scandal at a location in Ohio and the entire brand takes the hit. Overexpand with poorly vetted operators, enforce standards too rigidly for local markets to adapt, and suddenly, your asset-light empire has very heavy problems. But at least with franchising, you still control the recipe. Unlike the next model, where you hand over your entire creation and just hope they don't ruin it. Licensing and royalties. This is the closest thing to a money printer that exists in business. You create something once, and then you get paid every single time someone else uses it. That's the whole model, and it's exactly as good as it sounds, until it isn't. Here's how it works. You own intellectual property, whether that's a patent, a copyright, a trademark, or a proprietary technology. Instead of building every product yourself, you grant other companies the right to use your creation in exchange for upfront fees, minimum guarantees, and ongoing royalties calculated as a percentage of their revenue. They do the work, you collect checks. Microsoft does this with their ISV royalty licensing program. Software companies embed Microsoft products into their own solutions and pay royalties based on distribution. Then there's ARM, the purest example of this model at scale. ARM designs chip architectures, licenses them to manufacturers, and collects a royalty on every single chip produced. They don't fabricate anything. They don't own a single factory. They just own the blueprint, and the blueprint prints money. The defensibility here is rooted entirely in law. Patents and trademarks grant legal exclusivity, and the model scales with near zero marginal cost as more licensees adopt your IP. Every new partner is basically free revenue. But here's the thing, the clock is always ticking. Patents expire. Brands get diluted when you hand them to anyone with a checkbook. Licensees produce garbage quality products that damage your reputation. And every dollar you don't spend on enforcement is a dollar someone else pockets without permission. It's a money printer with a built-in expiration date. But if you think passive income sounds too good to be true, wait until you hear about the model that charges people whether they use the product or not. Subscription. Subscription is the most seductive lie in business. It looks like guaranteed recurring revenue on a spreadsheet, a beautiful upward curve that makes investors salivate. But here's the thing, you have to re-earn that payment every single month. Every single one. The core mechanic is simple. Instead of charging per unit or a per transaction, you charge a recurring fee for ongoing access. The customer pays, they get the thing. They stop paying, they lose the thing. Revenue becomes predictable, and your valuation skyrockets because Wall Street loves recurring revenue like nothing else on Earth. Netflix proved how powerful this could be. In 1999, they launched a flat monthly fee DVD by mail service. No late fees, no per rental charges. That single decision destroyed Blockbuster and fundamentally rewired how consumers expect to pay for entertainment. Then they pivoted to streaming, and the model got even stronger because the marginal cost of serving one more subscriber dropped to basically nothing. The defensibility is real, predictable cash flow lets you invest long-term, users build habits, accumulate watch histories, create playlists. Switching costs are mild but persistent, and at scale, serving subscriber number 10 million costs almost nothing more than serving subscriber number 9 million. But here's where the model turns into a treadmill. Churn is the silent killer. If 5% of your subscribers cancel every month, you need to replace all of them just to stay flat. That means constant acquisition spending just to avoid shrinking. Now multiply that by subscription fatigue, where consumers see 8 different subscriptions on their statement and start cutting the ones they barely use. You're always one, do I really need this? Away from getting canceled. And the desperate response, spending more to justify the price, often increases costs faster than it reduces churn. If you think recurring revenue sounds exhausting, wait until you hear about a model where you don't charge the user at all. Advertising. Here's the thing about advertising as a business model. Everyone thinks the product is free, you open Instagram, you scroll through Reels, you don't pay a cent. But you're not the customer, you never were, you're the inventory. Your attention, your habits, your 2 a.m. doom scrolling patterns, that's what's being sold. The advertiser is the customer, you're the product on the shelf, and Meta is the textbook example of how this works at scale. Businesses open Ads Manager, pick an objective like sales or leads, define an audience by age, location, interests, set a budget, and let the algorithm figure out where to shove their ad across feeds, stories, and reels. They pay per impression, per click, or per action. Meta takes the money. You see the ad for protein powder you mentioned once near your phone? Circle of life. But here's where most people get this model wrong. Startups love saying we'll monetize with ads. Cool. Do you have 500 million daily active users? Because you need that kind of scale for this to work. Ad revenue is measured in fractions of a cent per impression. You need an ocean of eyeballs just to keep the lights on. The defensibility, when you do reach that scale, is genuinely massive. Two-sided network effects between users and advertisers, years of accumulated behavioral data that competitors can't replicate overnight, and algorithmic targeting precision that only improves with more usage. It compounds. That's why there's a winner-takes-most dynamic that basically starves smaller publishers. But it's fragile in ways people don't expect. Recession hits, ad budgets get slashed first, and your revenue drops off a cliff. Users get fed up with intrusive ad loads and install blockers. Privacy regulations chip away at targeting precision, and suddenly, that free service costs a lot more to operate than it earns, which is, not ideal. But at least advertising only sells your attention. The next model sells something far more valuable: access to both sides of a transaction simultaneously. Marketplace and platform. Here's the most paradoxical business model in existence. You build the most valuable company by owning absolutely nothing. Airbnb owns 0 properties, Uber employs 0 drivers, yet they orchestrate millions of transactions daily, skimming a percentage off the top of each one. You provide the infrastructure, the search, the matching, the payments, the ratings, the dispute resolution, and you take a cut of every handshake that happens on your turf. The defensibility here is legendary once it works. More sellers attract more buyers attract more sellers. It's a flywheel that, once spinning, creates a barrier competitors cannot easily overcome. You've got accumulated transaction data, reputation scores, ecosystem services, all deepening the moat with every passing month. Try launching a competitor to Uber in a city where Uber already has 50,000 drivers. Good luck getting your first rider to open the app and see 0 cars available. But here's the thing. Before that flywheel starts spinning, you have to solve what might be the single hardest problem in business: the chicken and egg problem. Too few buyers means no sellers show up. Too few sellers means no buyers bother checking. This is the graveyard of marketplace startups. Hundreds of companies have built perfectly functional platforms that nobody used because they couldn't get both sides populated simultaneously. It's an impossible bootstrapping problem that requires subsidies, manual curation, or geographic concentration just to get the first spark of liquidity. And even after you solve that, there's a second killer lurking: disintermediation. Participants discover each other on your platform, realize they're paying you 15 to 20% for the introduction, and quietly take the relationship off platform. Your own success becomes the mechanism of your revenue loss. So the model's either a goldmine or a mass grave. Very little in between. But if you think orchestrating strangers is complicated, wait until you hear about the model that gives away the entire product for free and somehow still makes billions. Freemium and SS. No surprise, here's the most counterintuitive business model on this list. Take the thing you spent years building, give it away for free, and then hope that a tiny fraction of people eventually pay you enough to cover everyone else. That sounds insane. And yet it's the dominant playbook of modern software. The way it works is deceptively simple. You offer a basic version of your product to anyone who wants it, no credit card required, but you build in intentional limitations, storage caps, feature restrictions, usage quotas. The free version is genuinely useful, but it's deliberately incomplete. Then, as users grow and hit those walls, you offer premium tiers that remove the constraints. Spotify does this with music. Free listening exists, but it's ad-supported and offline mode is locked behind a subscription. Dropbox gives you a small amount of free storage, and the moment you fill it up, there's a paid plan waiting. Here's the thing. The product itself becomes your marketing. Every time someone shares a Dropbox folder or sends a Spotify playlist, adoption spreads organically without a single ad dollar spent. Defensibility comes from product-led growth. Low friction adoption builds massive user bases fast. Once people are in, habit formation kicks in, data accumulates, integrations create ecosystem lock-in that makes switching feel like surgery. But the critical failure here is conversion economics, and it's brutal. If your free tier is too generous, nobody upgrades. If it's too restrictive, nobody bothers adopting in the first place. And meanwhile, you're paying infrastructure costs for millions of users who contribute exactly 0 revenue. The entire model lives or dies on calibrating that tension between generosity and sustainability, which is, not ideal when you're burning cash to serve free users while waiting for 3% of them to maybe pull out a credit card. Give too much away, you go broke. Give too little, you never grow. Every successful SaaS company is walking that line every single day. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, click the video on the screen now.